Well, hello there, my friends. I'm Marley Bird, and this is video 2 of the spring knit along for the My First Knit Summer Vest. By this point, you have completed just about half of the bottom of the vest, and we will continue on to finish the bottom of the vest, and then we will bind off for those armholes to divide the vest into sections and move on from there. This is a pretty quick video, and I'm going to walk you through everything you need to know to complete this week's homework. I will also encourage you to watch the video in its entirety so that way you can pick up the tips I have for being able to maintain the stitch pattern and at the same time adjust it as you work the bind offs for the armhole and then subsequently future decreases. All right. While we are here, let's go ahead and mention that this is a free pattern available at yarnspirations.com. I've put a link in the video description box right down there that will take you to a page where you can find out how to get this pattern and all the details regarding the pattern. If you have not watched video 1, it is not too late to join in the fun. Please go ahead, grab your pattern, grab your materials, and join in. For everybody else who has completed their homework, let's go ahead and take a look at what we have. For a quick recap of video 1, we learned how to do our cast on, how to work our 2x2 ribbing and garter stitch. We talked about the stockinette stitch and the wrap stitches. I showed you how to work it up on this worsted weight yarn. I also had another sample where we talked about doing the wraps on the right side and the wraps on the wrong side. Your homework for video 1 was to complete rows 1 through 18 a total of 3 times. And so by this point, you're ready to continue on in the pattern. Here's the cool part. The bottom part of this vest is 16.5 inches long from the armhole for all of the sizes. So your homework for this week is to complete the rest of your vest until it measures 16.5 inches, and you need to end after a row 8. It is more important that you finish on a row 8 for this portion of the pattern. So if you are reaching your 16.5 inches and you're either going to go over or be a little bit under when you hit your row 8, it is more important that you stop on your row 8 than achieve that 16.5 inches. You will not run out of yarn if you have to go over a little bit more, so don't worry about that. Once you finish row 8, you will be ready to divide for the fronts and the back on the next row, which is a row 9. We also know that a row 9 is a wrap row. So as we work across our stitches on this next row, the stitch pattern repeat will be interrupted by the bind offs that we do for the armhole. I will show you how to work the stitch pattern repeat across the row and how to incorporate the bind offs all while maintaining the stitch pattern. You will have to make adjustments where the wraps cannot be made in their entirety and they're not right next to the armhole, but I will show you my trick to do that and hopefully you will have no problem. Now that we know that the body measures 16.5 inches and we've ended on a row 8, we are ready to divide for the fronts and the back, and we will do that by binding off stitches at the armhole. Now I've marked off where my armhole stitches are going to go to make it easier for me to know where I'm doing it as I'm talking to you here in the video, but the written instructions walk you through the exact number of stitches you need to work in pattern before you get to cast off these stitches. Okay, so you'll notice as you look at your pattern, it says to work across X number of stitches. Now remember, the first 20 stitches of your pattern is this 2x2 ribbing. So you want to start off with the 2x2 ribbing, and that'll be 20 of the stitches that are mentioned in your initial amount you're told to work across. And these stitches here, if I can remember to knit 2 and then purl 2, as we work across these stitches, we will then place them on a holder to set them aside. So that way we can then only work the back stitches as we continue on with the pattern, and that'll make sense here in a minute. All right, so I have worked across 20 stitches. I've slipped my marker, and this is where I would carry on with my row 9 stitch pattern over the remainder of the stitches listed for this section. So for me, I'm going to go over to this marker here, okay? So I would knit 1. Remember, that counts as that first stitch here. That's not our repeat. Here's our repeat. We knit 3. And then we do a wrap. So I'm going to use this shawl pin here just to show you that you can really use anything that you have available that allows you to make these wraps. I've slipped 5 of them to the shawl pin holder. It's just a stitch holder here. And then I have my yarn to the wrong side of my fabric, and I'm going to work my wrap. By this point in the project, you know how to do this. I am not gonna lie though, I'm curious how many of you like to work those off, or if you're like me and you just slip them off and pop them on like that. So that is our 5 wrap, and then to complete our repeat, we have to knit 4. 1, 2, 3, and then 4. Okay? So I would continue doing that repeat until I got to where I'm gonna cast off stitches. Now, for me, I've added markers where I'm going to cast off stitches. And I will say that I suggest you do that as well. So before you start row 9, just start counting across your stitches. Like if it says to work across 52, count 52 stitches and then place a marker. And then you'll know that that would be like the next 6 stitches. So it'd be a marker, 6 stitches, marker. That would be your armhole. But what I suggest here at the start is at the beginning where it says knit across X number of stitches, count those off on your pattern, add a marker, and then count off the number of stitches you're going to cast off, add a marker, and then count across the stitches that you have to work for the back, add a marker, count the stitches you'd have to cast off, add a marker, and then continue on. It will just help you visualize whether you have enough stitches to complete the repeat, okay? So that's one suggestion here. But once you reach where the cast off is going to be, we will change up this stitch pattern. Now, we do have to get all the way to the cast off, so I will knit that 1 stitch, and now I have all of these stitches hanging out here. And you'll notice in the pattern, it says to place all of these stitches onto scrap yarn. Well, that's really quite simple. You'll grab some scrap yarn and your tapestry needle and then slip all those stitches to that, and then essentially set those aside. We'll come back to those later. When I have them all on a holder, I like to just tie my ends together just so that I don't accidentally grab it and pull it out. I wouldn't want that to happen. But now I have all of these stitches all on a holder, and I'm just gonna set those aside, okay? Now my marker has fallen out, which is fine, and we can continue. So I'm still working with the same yarn, and it's coming from that section, and this is where I would cast off the number of stitches written in the pattern. So I would knit 2, have the back stitch, jump the front stitch, knit 1 more, back stitch, jump the front stitch. So even though I have technically worked 3 stitches, I've only bound off 2, and that's important, okay? So here's 3, here's 4, here's 5, here's 6, and here's 7. Now that leaves me with 1 stitch on this side of the marker, and I need to get rid of that 1 stitch because I need to bind off 8 for my pattern. So I would take my marker off, and I would go ahead and knit 1 more past my marker, and when I have this 1 stitch jump, that binds off my last stitch, and it leaves 1 stitch on my needle. That 1 stitch counts as one of my stitches for my next section. Okay, are you guys with me on that? So when you're binding off your stitches, you will have to essentially work 1 more stitch past the one you have marked and then have it jump. And then this 1 stitch left on your needle, that 1 stitch left on your needle will count into this next section. Now here's the tricky part. As we continue on with our row 9, we continue on with our stitch pattern repeat. But we are not going to start over at the start of our row 9. We continue on. So we have to think about the stitches we just bound off or cast off. So let's take a look here. We finished our repeat after those 4, and then we have 1 stitch here. So that would count as the first stitch of our repeat. Then we have, so that would be 1, here's 2, here's 3. Remember, our repeat is knit 3. And then we have 5 stitches that would be wrapped. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then here's 1 stitch from our stitch pattern repeat, the next part. Here's the second one, here's the third one, here's the fourth one. So that is all 1 repeat, and then we would start here again for the next repeat. So we would knit 1, 2, 3, and then begin our wraps. I can hear some of you out there, you're like, what? I don't understand what's going on. Basically, we are continuing on with our stitch pattern, but we need to remember that starting right here does not mean we do knit 1 and then start our stitch pattern. Otherwise, our wraps are not going to line up below. So we need to make sure we count across our row to know where we are. So let's do this one more time. I bound off 8 stitches here, and I don't like to look off at the bind off stitches. I look at the rows underneath to be able to count. So I have 1 stitch here that was left after my repeat. So there's 1. So my repeat is knit 3. So there's 1 in this row. Here's 2, here's 3. Then we have the 5 wraps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then we have knit 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the end of the repeat, and we're ready to start again, which would be knit 3, 1, 2, 3, and then do wraps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so on and so forth. Does that make sense? Okay, so that means I need to knit 2 more stitches here before I can start my repeat. Hopefully you are with me here on this. So to continue on with my stitch pattern repeat, to maintain my established pattern, that there would be a repeat. And now I'm ready to start again. So I knit 3. I do my wraps. And if I've done this correctly, these wraps will line up with these down here. That's our goal. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. My yarn is in back. Oops, I split that yarn. I don't want to do that. Continue to split it. Okay, so there's that. And then I finish my repeat, which would be knit 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Does that wrap line up with this one? It absolutely does, and I can continue on. Can you see how that works up? So as we're working this, it's important that you maintain your stitch pattern across the row, even when the bind offs interrupt the stitch pattern. How are you doing? Are you still with me? Did that make sense to you, how you would maintain the stitch pattern across the row, even with those bind offs? How about this? Let's take a look at how I usually will figure out where my stitch pattern needs to change up when I'm working with a pattern like this one. It's no secret that I'm a very visual learner. So anytime I can apply words into some sort of a format of a diagram or a chart, it helps me a lot. It helps me understand where stitches are placed and how it's going to look and what I need to change to make it come out correctly. So what you're looking at here, this is a chart of a size small vest, excluding the collar stitches. So each one of these squares represents 1 stitch, okay? This first row down here is a row 18. So as you work up a total of 8 rows, this next row up here is a row 9. And this would represent the row that I am going to divide for the fronts and the back. Okay, you with me so far? So I've just condensed the instructions up to where I'm looking at a row 9 right here. And I wanted to be able to see these stitches down here. That's why I included them. So I've charted out what all of my stitches would be like for a size small. Then on the chart number 2, I plotted out where my armhole bind-offs would be. So what I did was I counted across my 20 collar stitches, and then I counted off across the next number of stitches I needed to do to work the right front. Then in purple, I made each square in purple for each stitch I'm going to cast off. And then I extended that line up, because once those stitches are cast off, all of these stitches in here disappear. Okay, so I wanted to make sure that I have a solid line ready to go. Then I counted across my stitches for my back. Again, I plotted out the stitches I'm going to bind off or cast off for the other armhole. And then I extended those up because these are all going to disappear. And then I counted to make sure that I had the right count of stitches for my left front and then the 20 stitches for my collar. You with me so far? Okay. You can do this on your own, just with some graph paper. After I've done this, in chart number 3, you can see I've then blacked out all of the bind off stitches. So again, these stitches, once I've bound those off, they disappear. So I've just made them all purple. And to me, that means they've disappeared. Okay. So now I can take a look at this here and I can see, okay, where is it that there are wrap stitches that might get interrupted, and I might have to change those stitches to where they're plain stockinette, where I don't do a wrap. Well, I can immediately see, just looking at my chart number 2, that this wrap stitch right there, those wrap stitches, they are completely gone because I bound off down here, right? I bound off down here, so those are completely gone. So that's the first place that's gone. I can also see that right here, these wrap stitches butt up right next to the armhole, and I don't like that. I like to have at least one stitch between the armhole and the rest of the body before I have a wrap. So to me, I would make that wrap section right there stockinette. So I would erase those sort of bluish turquoise stitches and make them just white so that it's just plain stockinette. I would do the same for the left front too, because see how it butts up right next to the armhole? Plus, I want to make sure these look alike. You with me so far? So when I do that, that's where I come down here. I have eliminated those wraps. And now I have a visual representation of what I need to do as I'm working across row 9. I can see that I can work the wraps, and then right here I can see I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 knits. That means I know that after my wrap here, I have a knit 4, which is my repeat, and then I don't have enough stitches to complete my repeat, so I'll just have 2 more knit stitches. You with me? And then I can see, without having to count and know exactly what these stitches are, I can come over here and say, okay, so after my armhole here, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 knit stitches before I go into my wraps. To me, making a chart, whether you do it on a computer or you get some graph paper and some pencils, whatever works, it will really help you visualize how those stitches need to be placed. And this is a very helpful skill for all of you knitters out there, especially if you're going to do a project with lace or with cables or any sort of a stitch pattern that needs to be altered if you're going to do bind-offs or any sort of shaping. I use this entire technique to then continue on, and I will then, here's this, look at this. This is an entire chart, including the collar stitches for the top part of the vest. And I have stitches represented here for all of the wraps. I've changed where the wraps need to go if I couldn't complete them. This big black section, those mean there are no stitches there because there are stitches bound off down here. There are decreased stitches here, decreased stitches here, and then we have wraps and turn. So this here, this could be used as a pattern. This is a total of what will be week 3 and then week 4 for the pattern. You see how this works up? For me, being able to make charts like this to better see how my stitches are going to be placed and how a bind off or a decrease is going to change up a stitch pattern is vital. It makes me a better knitter and it helps me understand patterns much better. I encourage you to give this a try as well. If you are not into charts and you're better off counting off the stitches as they would be repeated, just like I showed you on the swatch right here, you can do that too. You do what works best for you. During this knit along, I'm here to help you out as much as possible. So just like in week 1, where I gave you the step-by-step downloadable PDF, I have the same thing available for you for video number 2. And here is some really great news. The step-by-step PDF takes you through the homework for video 2. You will work rows 1 through 18 2 more times, and then rows 1 through 8 1 more time. Remember, if you have not reached 16.5 inches and you are already at the row 8 and you need to go a little bit more to get 16.5, I would just stop. Or if you need to go a little bit more to reach the row 8, but it's going to make your work a little bit bigger than 16.5, that's okay. It is more important you get to a row 8 than reach 16.5. After you have finished row 8, that's where we will divide for the fronts and the back. And you will notice down here, I've already done all of the work for you as far as maintaining your stitch pattern repeat, so you don't have to figure that part out. That's right, I've already done the hard work. So unless you really want to do the charts so that you can learn how to do it, you don't have to. You can simply follow along with my written instructions that are on the step-by-step PDF. Pretty simple stuff, right? That's right, I said pretty simple stuff. All right, guys, the homework for this week is just finishing the bottom part, divide for the fronts and the back. Make sure you put those fronts on some scrap yarn and then put your work down, relax, and wait for week 3. That's where the fun really begins. We get some shaping going. We start to see some real progress on the project, and we're gonna talk more about the color placement as we continue on with the back and the fronts. There's a lot more to come. I hope you're enjoying this knit along and you're learning a lot and becoming a better knitter along with me. If you're working on this project, be sure to share with us on social media. Use hashtag MarleyBird or hashtag YarnSpirations. If you are not yet a part of the Marley Bird Facebook knit along group, be sure to join. There are a lot of wonderful people working on this knit along with you, and it's a great place for you to share your progress, ask questions, and get answers or encouragement whenever you need it along the way. I am so excited to see your progress, and I can't wait to get to week 3. So let's work on this together, and I'll see you then. Bye, everybody. Thanks so much for joining me on the Marley Bird YouTube channel. If you liked what you saw, don't forget to hit subscribe. I've put a link right over there, or you can watch a couple of the videos I've already selected for you right down there. If you want to follow me on social media, I've put my links right over there. You can have all Marley all the time. Bye, guys.